Picture this. A Roman general stands inside a church in Ravenna, surrounded by armed soldiers who have come to drag him out. He has an army of barbarian warriors fiercely loyal to him. He could give one order and turn them loose on the emperor's men.
Ravenna,
He could
a city
fight.
sheltered in the
He could
embrace
win.
of the
But he
Adriatic
doesn't.
marshes, the
He lays
last
down his
impregnable
sword because he
citadel of the
refuses
Western
to spill
Roman Empire.
blood. Days
A
later,
pre-dawn
that same
fog,
emperor
cold and
signs
damp
his
like a
death
shroud,
warrant.
clung
2
to the
years after
golden
that,
mosaics of
Rome
basilicas
itself
and the
burns
blank
for the first
walls of
time
the
in
imperial
800
palace.
years. Sacked by the very enemy this general had spent his life holding back. His name was Flavius Stilicho, and his story is one of the greatest betrayals in the history of civilization. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how the Roman Empire destroyed itself from the inside. Not with a bang, but with a signature on an execution order. At number 10, we start with a detail most people miss entirely. Stilicho was not Roman by blood. He was born around 359 AD in Roman territory, but his father was a Vandal, one of the very barbarian peoples that Rome spent centuries fighting. Yet from childhood, Stilicho was raised Roman. He spoke Latin. He trained in Roman military camps. He breathed Roman discipline. The empire had a long tradition of absorbing talented outsiders into its ranks, and Stilicho became the living proof that it worked. He rose through the officer corps not because of family connections or senatorial wealth, but because he was simply better than everyone around him. His Vandal heritage would follow him like a shadow for his entire career, weaponized by enemies who whispered that no barbarian could ever truly be loyal to Rome. Remember that whisper. It becomes a scream later, but his origins are only half the story. What launched him into the inner circle of Roman power was something far more personal. At number 9, we jump to 384 AD, when Emperor Theodosius I handed the young officer an assignment that would change everything. Stilicho was sent on a diplomatic embassy to the Persian court, a mission that required intelligence, composure, and political skill far beyond his rank. He succeeded, and Theodosius rewarded him not just with promotion, but with family. Stilicho married Serena, the emperor's own adopted niece. In one stroke, the Vandal's son became part of the imperial household. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a political fusion. Theodosius saw in Stilicho something he couldn't find in the pampered sons of Roman aristocrats. Grit, loyalty, a man who owed everything he had to the empire and would die before he let it fall. By around 393 AD, Theodosius promoted Stilicho to Magister Militum, the supreme commander of the Western Roman army. He was the most powerful soldier in the world. And then Theodosius did something that would set the stage for catastrophe. The next entry on our list is the moment the clock started ticking. At number 8, on January 17th, 395 AD, Theodosius the Great died in Mediolanum, modern-day Milan. The empire was split between his two sons. Arcadius, 18 years old, took the east. Honorius, just 11 years old, got the west. And Theodosius, on his deathbed, entrusted the care of young Honorius to one man, Stilicho. Think about that for a second. The most powerful empire on earth was now in the hands of a child, and the only adult keeping it together was a half-Vandal general that half the Roman Senate already distrusted. Stilicho became regent, father figure, and military protector rolled into one. He would later marry his own daughter, Maria, to Honorius, binding their families even tighter. But the boy emperor grew up weak, paranoid, and easily manipulated. The man standing between Honorius and total disaster was the same man Honorius would eventually destroy. And the first real test came almost immediately. At number 7, just 1 year after Theodosius died, a Gothic warlord named Alaric invaded Greece with a massive army. Stilicho marched south to meet him. This was the beginning of a rivalry that would last over a decade. A deadly chess match between two of the most capable military minds of the late Roman world. In 396 AD, Stilicho cornered Alaric in the Balkans and had a real chance to end him. But politics intervened. The Eastern Empire, jealous of Stilicho's influence, ordered him to withdraw. Alaric slipped away. This pattern would repeat itself again and again. Stilicho winning on the battlefield and politicians in distant capitals undermining him before he could finish the job. It's a pattern that should sound familiar to anyone who's ever watched a war fought by committee. But Stilicho wasn't just fighting Goths. His enemies were everywhere. At number 6, in 399 AD, a Roman governor named
Vandals,
Gildo
Suevi,
launched
Alans,
a rebellion in North
entire
Africa,
emigrating
cutting off the
populations
grain
moving into
supply
Gaul.
that fed the city of
Again,
Rome.
this isn't
The Eastern
really a
Empire
traditional
quietly
invasion.
backed the revolt,
It's more like a
hoping
mass
to
movement of
weaken
peoples
Stilicho's
through a
position.
collapsing border
It was a
structure.
knife aimed at
Sounds
the
a lot
belly
like
of
the southern
Western
border.
Empire.
And there are no...
Stilicho crushed it. He sent forces to North Africa, defeated Gildo, and restored the grain shipments. The people of Rome ate because of him. The Senate applauded, and then they went right back to whispering about the barbarian general who held too much power. Stilicho's reward for saving them was suspicion. Every victory made him more dangerous in the eyes of the men who had never held a sword. The real fireworks, though, came in the early 400s. At number 5, the years 402 and 403 AD brought Stilicho face to face with Alaric again, this time on Italian soil. At the Battle of Pollentia in 402, Stilicho met the Gothic army in open combat and won. He captured Alaric's camp, seized prisoners, and drove the Goths back. The following year at Verona, he did it again. He surrounded Alaric's forces and had the Gothic king trapped. And then Stilicho made a decision that historians still argue about. He let Alaric go. He allowed the Goths to withdraw into Illyricum. Some scholars believe Stilicho saw Alaric as a useful tool, a force he could later deploy against the Eastern Empire. Others think he simply lacked the troops to finish the job and risk a bloody siege. Whatever the reason, Alaric survived, and that survival would cost Rome everything. Here's where the pressure became unbearable. At number 4, on August 23rd, 406 AD, outside Florence, Stilicho faced his most desperate battle. A massive barbarian horde led by a Gothic king named Radagaisus poured into Italy. This wasn't a raiding party. This was an invasion force bent on plundering the heartland of the empire. Stilicho gathered every soldier he could find, and he destroyed them. Radagaisus himself was captured and executed outside the city walls. It was Stilicho's greatest military triumph, but the victory came at a terrible price. He had stripped the frontiers bare to fight this war, and just months later, in December of 406, the Rhine frontier collapsed. The river froze solid, and an enormous mass of Vandals, Alans, and Suebi walked across the ice into Gaul. Stilicho, stretched impossibly thin, couldn't stop them. The western provinces began to burn, and the political fallout nearly buried him. At number 3, in 407 AD, Stilicho made the most controversial decision of his career. He went before the Roman Senate and persuaded them to pay Alaric 4,000 pounds of gold to keep his Gothic army from invading Italy again. 4,000 pounds of gold. The Senate was furious. One senator reportedly called it not a peace but a contract of servitude. The Roman aristocracy saw it as humiliation, paying a barbarian to behave. Stilicho saw it as buying time, keeping Alaric contained while he dealt with crises on every other front. He was playing a chess game with no good moves, only less bad ones. But the gold payment gave his enemies exactly what they needed. Proof, they said, that the half-Vandal general cared more about barbarians than about Roman honor. The trap was almost ready to snap shut. At number 2, in the summer of 408 AD, a court official named Olympius began whispering in Emperor Honorius's ear. On May 1st, 408, the Eastern Emperor Arcadius died in Constantinople. Stilicho proposed traveling east to manage the succession, a reasonable plan given the political chaos. But Olympius twisted it. He told Honorius that Stilicho's real plan was to install his own son, Eucharius, on the eastern throne. He painted every action Stilicho had ever taken as part of a vast barbarian conspiracy. And Honorius, now 24 years old, but still the same frightened boy who had hidden behind Stilicho's shield his entire life, believed it. In August 408, mutiny erupted among the legions at Pavia. Officers loyal to Stilicho were hunted down and murdered. The general who had held the empire together for 13 years was suddenly a fugitive in his own country. And now we reach the moment that sealed Rome's fate. At number 1, Stilicho fled to Ravenna and took sanctuary inside a church. He still had loyal barbarian troops. He could have fought. His supporters begged him to resist, but Stilicho refused to raise arms against his own emperor. Even now, knowing what was coming, he would not betray Rome. Soldiers arrived with a promise. "Come out," they said, "and the emperor guarantees your safety." On what sources record as August 22nd or 23rd, 408 AD. The exact date is still disputed among historians. Stilicho walked out of that church. The promise was a lie. He was seized and executed on the spot on Honorius's direct orders. His son Eucharius was hunted down and killed shortly after. Honorius divorced Stilicho's second daughter, Thermantia. A purge swept through the empire, targeting anyone connected to the dead general. And then the real consequences hit. Thousands of barbarian Federate soldiers who had served Rome loyally under Stilicho watched as the empire murdered their commander and persecuted their families. They didn't wait for an invitation. They defected en masse to the one man who would have them. Alaric, the Gothic king, who Stilicho had beaten twice, who Stilicho had contained, who Stilicho had spent a decade keeping out of Italy, suddenly had an army swollen with Rome's own trained soldiers. And Rome's best general was dead in a ditch in Ravenna. 2 years later, in 410 AD, Alaric marched into Rome. The city that had stood unconquered for 8 centuries fell in 3 days. The Eternal City was sacked, and the man who could have stopped it was already bones in the ground, killed not by an enemy, but by the very empire he gave his life to protect. Every entry on this list points to the same brutal truth. Stilicho didn't lose to Alaric. He didn't lose to the Vandals or the Goths or the Frozen Rhine. He lost to the men behind him, the courtiers, the senators, the whisperers, who decided that a loyal half-barbarian was more dangerous than the actual barbarians at the gate. Rome didn't fall because its enemies were too strong. Rome fell because it executed the only man holding the walls together. So here's the question I want you to think about. If Stilicho had fought back, if he had turned his loyal troops against Honorius and seized power for himself, would Rome have survived? Or was the empire already too broken, too rotten from the inside to be saved by any one man? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to see what happened next when Alaric actually walked through those gates in 410 AD, that story is coming soon.